6:15 in the morning in the Arabian Sea. The aircraft carrier United States ship Nimitz pushed relentlessly through the dark waters. This was not a scheduled freedom of navigation patrol. The strike group was hunting a newly positioned mobile missile battery hidden in the coastal mountains. The question was whether the Americans would find the concealed launchers before the launchers locked onto them. The morning air was heavy with salt and humidity. Above the flight deck, the sky transitioned from black to a deep and bruising purple. Two Arleigh Burke-class destroyers flanked the massive carrier. Their wakes cut stark white lines across the rolling ocean. The Nimitz carried 90 aircraft and 5,000 sailors. Today, every one of those sailors was moving toward a highly contested choke point. Deep inside the carrier, the Combat Information Center was freezing. The air conditioning ran at maximum to cool the server racks. Blue light washed over the faces of 50 radar operators and tactical officers. Rear Admiral Thomas Vance stood behind the main tactical display. He held a cooling cup of coffee. He did not drink it. His eyes traced a projected path through the Strait of Hormuz. The passage was incredibly narrow. A carrier in the strait was a massive target with zero room to maneuver. The tactical action officer spoke without turning from his screen. "Admiral, we are 30 miles from the warning line. Speed is 20 knots. Vance kept his voice flat and calm. "Hold our course. I want maximum electronic surveillance on those northern ridges. Do we have the Hawkeye up?" "Yes, sir. The E-2 Hawkeye is on station at 25,000 feet. They are sweeping the coast. The missile battery is up there. We just need them to turn on their radar." 6:18 in the morning. The Zagros Mountains along the southern coast of Iran, high above the shoreline, concealed beneath camouflage netting and jagged rock, a deadly threat waited in the dark. Colonel Arash Kian stood in the cramped command module of a mobile coastal defense system. The air inside the bunker smelled faintly of diesel fuel and hot electronics. Outside, 3 heavy launcher vehicles held long-range anti-ship cruise missiles. They were fueled. Their gyros were spun up. The battery had moved under the cover of a massive sandstorm 2 days ago. American satellites had missed the relocation completely. Kian watched his own passive sensors. The massive acoustic and thermal signature of the American strike group was unmistakable on the displays. The ships were steaming straight into his engagement zone. The orders from the high command in Tehran were explicit. Do not initiate an unprovoked attack. But if the Americans crossed the territorial boundary line, defend the waters with extreme prejudice. The boundary was invisible on the ocean surface. The consequences of crossing it were highly destructive. A young radar operator turned from his glowing console. "Colonel, the American carrier is maintaining its course and speed. They are not turning away." Kian stepped closer to the screen. He studied the tracking data. Are they radiating? Have they spotted us? Only standard surface search radars are active. They do not know we are here. Keep our primary targeting radar offline. Let them come closer into the trap. 6:20 in the morning. The gap between the two military forces closed rapidly. The American admiral waited for an electronic signal in the dark. The Iranian colonel waited for the carrier to cross a designated line drawn on a digital map. Neither man wanted a war. Both men were perfectly positioned to start one. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 6:21 in the morning, the Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. A senior electronic warfare operator leaned into his console. His screens showed a chaotic mix of civilian and military signals bouncing around the congested Persian Gulf. Among the noise, a new frequency pulsed. It was faint. It was incredibly brief, but it was distinctly military. The operator raised his right hand. "Sir, I have a transient signal on the northern ridge. High frequency. It looks like a secure data link pulse." The tactical action officer walked over immediately. "Can you classify it?" "Negative. It was too short, but it matches the emission profile of a mobile command node." Admiral Vance stepped up behind them. He looked down at the fluctuating green lines. They are talking to their launchers. They are passing our coordinates. They know exactly where we are. Vance looked up at the main tactical display. The carrier was steaming at 20 knots. The navigable channel was steadily narrowing. "Tell the destroyers to shift to an air defense formation." I want their Aegis combat systems optimized for low-altitude, high-speed threats. Put them between us and that coastline. 6:23 in the morning. The Zagros Mountains. Colonel Kian watched his digital situation map. The blue icons of the American ships crept steadily eastward. They were 3 miles from the invisible territorial warning line. The tension in the underground bunker was a physical weight. Men breathed shallowly. Eyes stayed locked on monitors. The targeting officer wiped sweat from his face. Colonel, the American destroyers are accelerating. They are moving ahead of the carrier. Kian nodded slowly. They suspect we are here. They are creating a shield wall to protect the Nimitz. The officer turned in his chair. Should we illuminate them? Our passive track is degrading. We need hard telemetry to lock the weapons. Not yet. Kian kept his voice low and steady. If we ping them with the main radar, we lose our element of surprise. They will know exactly which ridge we are hiding on. Wait until they cross the line. Kian looked at the 3 green lights on his master console. The lights represented 3 active launchers. They held massive supersonic cruise missiles designed specifically to break an aircraft carrier in half. Firing them would start a war that would burn the entire region. Not firing them would mean failing his explicit orders to defend the coast. 6:24 in the morning. Aboard the Nimitz. The electronic warfare operator spoke loudly. Signal spike. Multiple transient bursts. They are networking their batteries. Vance crossed his arms over his chest. They are sinking the launchers. How far to the warning line? 2 miles, Admiral. We will cross the boundary in less than 6 minutes. Sound General Quarters. The alarm tones blared through the massive ship. The shrill, pulsing noise echoed down miles of steel corridors. 5,000 sailors dropped their morning routines and sprinted to their battle stations. Red lights flashed in the passageways. Heavy steel doors slammed shut and locked tight. The ship transformed from a floating city into a sealed, compartmentalized fortress. Vance stared at the digital coastline on the main screen. Come on, show me where you are. 6:25 in the morning, the coastal bunker. The targeting officer called out. The carrier strike group is now 1 mile from the boundary. They are not changing course. They are coming straight through. Kian made his decision. He would not fire first, but he would let the Americans know they were looking down the barrel of a loaded gun. It was a massive gamble. Kian placed his hand on the master control panel. Power up the primary fire control radar. Paint the carrier. The operator flipped 2 heavy physical switches. Transmitting now. Radar is active. An invisible wave of high-energy radiation shot down from the mountains. It slammed into the American fleet. The silent hunt was over. The targeting had begun. 6:25 in the morning. The Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The threat warning receiver screamed. It was a solid and unbroken tone. It was the sound of a primary fire control radar locking directly onto the ship. The invisible beam of radiation painted the massive carrier from bow to stern. The tactical action officer shouted over the blaring alarm. Vampire warning, we are painted. Coastal battery fire control is active and tracking. Admiral Vance gripped the edge of the tactical console. His knuckles turned white. Do we have a launch? Negative launch. They are just illuminating us. But the lock is solid. Vance turned to the air boss. The time for passive surveillance was over. Alert 5. I want 4 F-35 fighters off the deck immediately. Load them for suppression of enemy air defenses. The air boss picked up his heavy red phone. Flight deck. Launch the alert fighters. Combat thrust. Turn the ship into the wind. Deep vibrations rumbled through the floorboards of the carrier. The massive nuclear-powered vessel began a hard turn to generate wind over the deck. On the roof, steam catapults pressurized with a deafening hiss. Flight deck crews in colored vests sprinted across the non-slip coating. They armed live munitions in the dark. 6:26 in the morning, 10 miles off the Iranian coast. 4 heavily armed fast attack craft cut through the choppy waves. They moved at 50 knots. Their hulls slammed violently against the black water. These were not standard Navy patrol boats. They belonged to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. They carried heavy machine guns and short-range anti-ship missiles. Commander Tarek stood in the lead boat. Heavy salt spray soaked his dark uniform. He held a secure radio handset tightly against his ear. The roar of the outboard engines was deafening. The voice of his sector general cracked through the encrypted static. The Americans are approaching the territorial boundary. Push out and meet them. Screen the missile battery. Tariq keyed his microphone. We are moving to the intercept line. We will swarm the lead American destroyer. He signaled the other 3 boats with a flashing light. The tight formation spread out into a wide hunting line. They were small and fast. They were designed to overwhelm larger ships by attacking from multiple angles at once. 6:27 in the morning. The United States ship Higgins. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer sailed 3 miles ahead of the Nimitz. It was the tip of the American defensive spear. The bridge was dark except for the glow of the instrument panels. The surface search radar operator called out suddenly. Multiple high-speed surface contacts. Bearing 030. Range 15 miles and closing fast. Speed is 50 knots. The ship captain stepped to the center of the bridge. Classify the contacts. Profile matches Iranian fast attack craft. Bog Hammer class. They are operating in a coordinated swarm formation. They are intercepting our track. The captain picked up the secure line to the Nimitz. Strike Group Actual. This is Guardian 1. We have 4 fast movers inbound from the coast. They are highly aggressive. Admiral Vance replied instantly from the carrier. Hold your fire unless fired upon. Do not let them inside your defensive perimeter. The destroyer captain hung up the handset. He turned to his tactical officer. Spin up the close and weapon systems. Man the 50 caliber deck mounts. Flood the torpedo tubes. 6:28 in the morning. The coastal bunker in the Zagros Mountains. Colonel Kien watched his tactical monitors. The situation was spiraling faster than he intended. The High Command had ordered the fast boats to deploy without consulting his battery. It was a dangerous lack of coordination. His targeting officer pointed at the digital map. Colonel, the attack craft are moving directly toward the American screening destroyer. Kien let out a heavy breath. They are going to trigger a kinetic response. If the American destroyer fires on those boats, we will have to launch the heavy missiles to protect them. The weapons officer looked at Kien. Missile gyros are stable. Telemetry is fully locked on the carrier. Do I arm the warheads? Kien hesitated for 2 seconds. He listened to the hum of the power generators. He looked at the red tracking icon of the Nimitz. Then he gave the order. Arm the warheads. Prepare for ripple fire. The 3 green lights on the primary console clicked over to red. The trap was fully set. 6:29 in the morning. The bridge of the United States ship Higgins. The 4 Iranian fast attack craft crossed the 10-mile invisible line. They did not slow down. Instead, they accelerated. Their wakes tore white scars across the dark water. The swarm broke into 2 pairs. They angled to flank the American destroyer from both sides. This was a textbook pincer movement. It was designed to split the ship's defensive fire. The tactical officer called out the ranges. His voice was tight but controlled. Target Group Alpha is at 8 miles. Speed is 55 knots. Target Group Bravo is flanking to the south. We have visual confirmation. They are manning their heavy deck weapons. The captain of the Higgins stepped to the communications console. He picked up the handset and broadcast on the internationally recognized maritime distress frequency. Unidentified fast attack craft approaching United States Navy warship. You are standing into danger. Turn away immediately or you will be subject to defensive fire. There was no response. The radio channel emitted only the hiss of static. The radar screens showed the contacts rapidly closing the distance. 6:30 in the morning. The lead Iranian attack craft. Commander Tariq heard the American warning over the open channel. He did not touch his radio. His orders from the High Command were rigid. Press the boundary. Screen the missile battery. Force the Americans to blink first. The wind whipped violently around him. His heavy machine gunner turned back. The man was waiting for an order. His hands gripped the twin barrels of his weapon. Tariq signaled with his left hand. Keep pushing forward. Maintain the flanking maneuver. Through the ocean haze, the massive gray silhouette of the American destroyer came into sharp focus. It was a towering fortress of steel and radar domes. Tariq knew his small fiberglass boats were entirely outmatched in a long-range fight. But if they closed inside 3 miles, the destroyer's heavy guns could not depress low enough to hit them. 6:31 in the morning. The Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The threat warning receiver continued its steady and piercing scream. The coastal missile battery still held a hard radar lock on the aircraft carrier. Admiral Vance watched the digital display. The gap between the Higgins and the Iranian fast boats was shrinking by the second. 7 miles, 6 miles. The tactical action officer stood rigidly beside Vance. Admiral, the Higgins is requesting weapons free. They want to engage the swarm with the .50 caliber mounts before the boats breach their minimum defensive perimeter. Vance looked at the glowing red icon on the northern ridge. It represented the coastal battery. If Higgins fires on those boats, the commander on that mountain will launch his heavy missiles. He will have to. We will force his hand, sir. The fast boats carry short-range anti-ship missiles. If they get inside 4 miles, they can severely damage the Higgins. Vance weighed the brutal arithmetic of the rules of engagement. Firing first guaranteed a massive missile exchange. It guaranteed dead sailors. Holding fire meant absorbing the first blow. It was the heaviest burden of command. Vance picked up the command microphone. Guardian 1, this is Strike Group Actual. Hold your fire. I repeat, do not engage with lethal force. Let them cross the 5-mile line. Prepare all non-lethal deterrents. 6:32 in the morning. The bridge of the Higgins. The destroyer captain heard the order from the admiral. He tightened his grip on the steel railing. It went against every instinct to let an armed threat get closer. But he understood the strategic picture. The carrier was the priority. The surface search operator spoke sharply. Target Group Alpha is crossing the 5-mile line. They are maintaining intercept course. Fire the warning flares, the captain ordered. Put them right over their bows. On the forward deck of the destroyer, heavy launcher tubes rotated toward the incoming boats. A rapid volley of brilliant white phosphorus flares shot into the dark morning sky. They burst directly over the Iranian swarm. They rained blinding light and thick white smoke over the water. The standoff was over. The physical confrontation had begun. 6:32 in the morning, 10,000 feet above the Persian Gulf. 4 F-35 Lightning fighters broke through the morning haze. They flew in a wide tactical spread. Their afterburners glowed blue against the dark sky. The flight lead pushed his throttle forward. He carried guided munitions designed to crack hardened concrete bunkers. His target was the coastal mountain ridge. The pilot spoke over the secure channel. Strike Group Actual. This is Raven 1. We are on station. We have the hostile battery painted. We are holding at the release line. Admiral Vance responded instantly from the carrier. Hold your position. Do not drop. We are trying to keep the lid on this. Understood. We are orbiting at weapon release range. 6:33 in the morning. The coastal bunker in the Zagros Mountains. Colonel Kian stared at the digital video feed from his fast attack boats. The screen was filled with blinding white light and thick smoke. The audio channel was pure chaos. The bunker smelled of ozone and hot dust. The cooling fans roared against the desert heat. The tactical officer grabbed his headset. Colonel, the fast boats report they are under heavy fire. The Americans are using incendiary munitions. They are blinding our crews. Are the boats taking structural damage? Unknown. The smoke is too thick. They are completely blind on the water. Kian looked at his master console. The 3 red lights glowed intensely. The heavy anti-ship missiles were fully armed. The American destroyer had crossed the invisible line. They had fired on Iranian naval forces. The strict conditions of his engagement orders were met. He was authorized to kill the carrier. Give me the final firing solution on the aircraft carrier, Kian ordered. Bypass the destroyer. We strike the head of the snake. The targeting officer typed rapidly. Solution locked. Telemetry is stable. Flight time to target will be 120 seconds. Initialize the launch sequencer. 6:34 in the morning. The Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The electronic warfare operator slammed his hand on his console. His voice cracked with pure adrenaline. Vampire warning. The coastal battery is shifting radar modes. They are moving to terminal guidance. They are entering the final firing sequence. The tactical action officer yelled across the crowded room. Missile launch is imminent. Countermeasures to full auto. Spin up the close-in weapon systems. Admiral Vance stood perfectly still. The noise in the room was deafening. Sirens wailed from the bulkheads. Tactical officers shouted intercept geometries. The digital map showed the carrier completely boxed in by the narrow strait. There was no room to maneuver the massive ship. If the missiles launched, they would have less than 2 minutes to shoot them down. Guardian 1, Vance said into the microphone. What is the status of the fast boats? The destroyer captain replied through heavy static. They are emerging from the smoke. They are not turning away. They are accelerating toward us. Vance looked at his air boss. The time for warnings was over. Tell the fighters to prepare for an immediate strike. If that mountain launches a single missile, I want that ridge turned to glass. 6:35 in the morning. The lead Iranian attack craft. Commander Tariq wiped burning white ash from his eyes. The American flares had temporarily blinded his entire crew. His boat shook violently as it hit a massive wave. The heavy machine gunner racked the bolt of his weapon. Tariq keyed his radio. Battery command, this is Swarm Lead. We are inside 4 miles. We have a clear shot at the American destroyer. The radio hissed. Tariq waited for the order to fire his short-range missiles. High above them, 4 stealth fighters circled like dark birds of prey. Deep in the mountains, 3 heavy cruise missiles shuddered on their launch rails. The firing circuits closed. The final safety locks disengaged. The world held its breath. 6:36 in the morning, the Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The tactical action officer watched the final countdown. The Iranian missile battery was seconds away from an automated launch. Missile launch sequence is active, the officer shouted. We have less than 10 seconds. Admiral Vance did not order the stealth fighters to drop their bombs. He chose the only option that did not immediately kill hundreds of people. Execute the blackout, Vance ordered. Burn the entire spectrum. The electronic warfare suites across the carrier strike group activated simultaneously. They did not use precision jamming. They unleashed a brute force wall of electromagnetic energy. It was a massive and concentrated burst designed to blind every sensor in the strait. Simultaneously, Vance ordered the helmsman to put the carrier into a hard, evasive turn. The massive ship shuddered violently as the rudders bit deep into the water. 6:36 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Zagros Mountains. Colonel Keon watched his master launch console. The sequencer counted down. 4 seconds. 3 seconds. Then, every monitor in the underground bunker exploded into white static. The steady hum of the targeting telemetry died instantly. Master warning alarms shrieked through the cramped concrete space. Targeting link severed, the weapons officer shouted. He slammed his fist on the console. We have lost the telemetry. The carrier is gone. The American electronic burst had perfectly severed the data link between the Iranian radar and the cruise missiles. Kian stared at the dead screens. He could engage the manual override. He could fire the heavy missiles blindly at the last known coordinates. But the American carrier was moving fast. A blind shot would almost certainly miss, and it would invite a devastating counterattack from the sky above. They are jamming us, Kian said. Shut down the primary radar. Shut it down now. If we keep broadcasting through this noise, those American stealth fighters will ride our own signal right into this mountain. The operator flipped the heavy physical switches. The massive radar dishes above the bunker immediately powered down. 6:37 in the morning, 10,000 feet above the Gulf. The flight lead of the F-35 squadron watched his primary attack display. The glowing red emission source on the mountain ridge abruptly vanished. The mountain was dark. He keyed his radio. Strike Group Actual, this is Raven 1. The hostile battery has ceased radiating. They dropped their radar. I have lost the primary electronic signature. I cannot guarantee a precision hit on the bunker without civilian collateral damage. 6:38 in the morning. The bridge of the United States ship Higgins. The massive electronic burst washed over the screening destroyer. The surface search radar screens filled with artificial snow. The digital tracking on the Iranian fast attack boats completely dissolved. The destroyer captain stepped out onto the open bridge wing. The morning air was thick with the smoke from their own warning flares. He could hear the high-pitched whine of the Iranian boat engines in the haze, but he could not see them. Hold your fire, the captain ordered his heavy gun crews. Do not shoot blind. Out on the water, Commander Tariq fought to control his attack craft. The American flares had blinded his eyes. Now, the American jamming had blinded his navigation and targeting systems. His secure radio produced nothing but a deafening electronic hiss. He was completely cut off from his higher command. 6:39 in the morning, the Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The carrier finished its violent turn. It was now steaming south. It was putting immediate distance between itself and the lethal mountain ridge. The electronic warfare operator looked back at the admiral. "Sir, the coastal battery is offline. They are hiding, but our own sensors are heavily degraded by our own jamming burst. We cannot see the mountain. We cannot see the fast boats." Admiral Vance breathed out slowly. The kinetic exchange had been stopped. The heavy missiles remained on their rails. The guided bombs remained in the fighter base. But the situation was highly unstable. Both military commanders were now sitting in the dark. Both men still had their fingers resting firmly on the trigger. Neither side knew what the other would do next. 6:40 in the morning, the Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The massive electronic warfare burst had saved the carrier, but it had also blinded the American strike group. The tactical displays flickered with artificial snow. The digital maps struggled to reacquire the coastal geography. Admiral Vance stood rigidly at the center console. The air in the room was cold and tense. "Status of the electronic spectrum," Vance demanded. The electronic warfare officer typed rapidly. "We are still pumping maximum broad spectrum noise. The Iranian radar remains offline. We have severed their kill chain. What about our own sensors? Highly degraded. We are looking through a dense fog of our own making. I cannot give you a clean track on the fast boats or the missile mountain." Vance looked at the air boss. "Where are the F-35 fighters?" "Holding station at 20,000 feet. They are orbiting south of the jamming cone. They still cannot target the mountain bunker without active emissions to guide them. Tell them to stay exactly where they are. Do not engage." Vance turned back to the main screen. The carrier was moving south at maximum speed. Every minute that passed put another half-mile of dark water between the ship and the Iranian coast. 6:41 in the morning. The coastal bunker in the Zagros Mountains. Colonel Kian stood in the dim light of emergency backups. The primary radar consoles were completely dead. The American jamming had fried the main receiver circuits. The 3 heavy anti-ship missiles were still armed and waiting on their rails. But they had no eyes. They had no target. The weapons officer looked up. His face was pale. "Colonel, we can switch to autonomous terminal guidance. We can fire the missiles on their internal gyros toward the last known coordinates of the carrier." Kian shook his head. "Negative. The Americans turned hard before they jammed us. They are not at those coordinates anymore. If we do not fire, the Americans will strike us as soon as the jamming stops. If we fire blindly, we might hit a civilian oil tanker in the strait," Kian said. His voice was perfectly calm. "Or we might miss entirely. And then we will have fired the first shots of a regional war for absolutely nothing. Disarm the warheads. Power down the launch rails." The weapons officer stared at him. It was a direct contradiction of the aggressive posture demanded by the high command. But Kian was the commander on the mountain. He made the final call. "Disarming the warheads," the officer said softly. The 3 red lights on the master console clicked back to green. Then they went dark. 6:43 in the morning. The bridge of the United States ship Higgins. The thick white smoke from the phosphorus flares began to clear. The sea breeze pushed the heavy cloud eastward. The destroyer captain stepped back inside the bridge. His surface search radar was slowly cutting through the electronic noise. "I have contacts on the water," the radar operator called out. 4 small surface vessels. Range is 3 miles. The captain gripped the railing. "Are they closing?" The operator watched the digital sweeps. The green dots stabilized on the screen. "Negative. They are turning away. The fast boats are turning north. They are heading back toward the Iranian coastline. Speed is 40 knots and increasing." 6:44 in the morning. The lead Iranian attack craft, Commander Tarek, pushed his throttles forward. His eyes burned from the American flares. His radio was completely useless. He had no orders. He had no radar. Continuing the attack against a guided missile destroyer in these conditions was tactical suicide. He flashed a hand signal to the rest of his swarm. They fell in behind him. The 4 boats skipped violently over the dark waves. They were leaving the engagement zone. The invisible boundary line faded behind them. The immediate crisis had broken. The weapons had not fired, but the standoff was far from over. 6:45 in the morning, the Combat Information Center aboard the Nimitz. The carrier strike group continued its push south. They were creating distance. But sailing blind was not a sustainable strategy. Admiral Vance needed his radar back. Vance turned to his electronic warfare officer. Begin a phased step down of the broad-spectrum jamming. Drop it by 20% increments. I want our surface search capability restored. The officer typed a rapid sequence. Dropping jamming power now. First increment. The artificial snow on the main tactical screens began to thin. The digital map of the Strait of Hormuz reappeared in patches. The blue icons of the American ships solidified. The tactical action officer leaned over his console. We have our eyes back, Admiral. Sweeping the coastal ridge now. The room fell completely silent. If the Iranian colonel powered his targeting radar back on, the threat warning receivers would immediately scream. The electronic countermeasure systems would automatically fire. The cycle of escalation would start all over again. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds passed. The warning alarm stayed quiet. Sir, the northern ridge remains dark. The electronic warfare officer pointed at his screen. No active emissions detected. The missile battery has not re-engaged. Vance allowed his shoulders to drop a fraction of an inch. The Iranian commander had chosen not to fire blindly. He had chosen restraint. It was a professional decision that just saved thousands of lives. 6:50 in the morning, the Zagros Mountains. Inside the coastal bunker, Colonel Kian watched his own screens flicker back to life. The American electronic assault was fading. The heavy static cleared. The regional tracking data automatically re-established its connections. His radar operator pointed at the primary display. Colonel, the American carrier has altered course. They have moved 5 miles south of the territorial warning line. They are increasing speed. Kian studied the track. The Americans were not running away. They were repositioning. They were establishing a defensive posture outside of his immediate engagement zone. They were giving him the space to stand down. The communications officer handed Kian a secure radio handset. Colonel, the sector general is on the line. He wants a status report on the heavy missiles. Kian took the heavy handset. He kept his voice completely level. General, the American carrier group approached the boundary line. We illuminated them with primary fire control. They recognized our defensive posture and turned away. The fast attack craft successfully screened our position. No missiles were launched. We hold the coast. It was the exact narrative the High Command needed to hear. It sounded like a victory. It hid the terrifying reality of how close they had all come to mutual destruction. 6:55 in the morning. The bridge of the United States ship Higgins. The horizon was completely clear. The thick white smoke from the flares had dissipated. The 4 Iranian fast attack craft were gone. The surface search radar operator confirmed the retreat. Target Group Alpha and Bravo are now 15 miles north. They are outside of intercept range. They are returning to their coastal base. The destroyer captain let out a long breath. The tension on the bridge slowly began to bleed away. He stepped back to the center console. Return the close-in weapon systems to standby, the captain ordered. Unload the 50 caliber deck mounts. Keep the crews at their stations. Safe the weapons. We are back to a standard defensive screen. 7 in the morning, 10,000 feet above the Gulf. The flight lead of the F-35 squadron banked his stealth fighter in a wide circle. The threat was gone. The mountain was quiet. The sun finally broke over the eastern horizon. It flooded the Persian Gulf with bright morning light. The radio clicked in his helmet. It was the air boss from the Nimitz, Raven 1. This is Strike Group Actual. The hostile battery is dormant. The surface threats have withdrawn. You are cleared to return to base. Good discipline up there. Copy that. Raven 1 flight is returning to the ship. The 4 fighters turned back toward the carrier. They carried thousands of pounds of guided munitions. They would bring every single bomb back home. The crisis had peaked. The fire had been contained. 10 in the morning, the flag plot aboard the United States ship Nimitz. The room was quiet. The harsh red lighting of general quarters was gone. Admiral Thomas Vance sat at the head of a long metal table. His coffee was finally fresh. He still did not drink it. His electronic warfare officer stood by a digital display. The screen showed the recorded telemetry from the morning encounter. The radar signatures of the Iranian coastal battery were categorized and saved into the intelligence database. The officer pointed at a spike on the graph. They had a solid firing solution. When the Higgins fired warning flares, the Iranian battery commander armed his warheads. If our destroyer had used lethal force against those fast boats, the Mountain would have launched 3 heavy cruise missiles. Flight time would have been under 2 minutes. Vance nodded slowly. He looked at the video feed from the United States ship Higgins. The destroyer captain looked exhausted but focused. "Your restraint saved this strike group," Vance said. "You took the aggressive push from their swarm without returning lethal fire. That gave me the window to blind their sensors instead of bombing their mountain." "Excellent discipline," the captain replied over the secure link. "Thank you, Admiral. It was entirely too close. It always is." Vance leaned back in his chair. "We learned their radar frequencies. They learned the power of our broad-spectrum jamming. It was a draw. And a draw means everyone goes home." 2 in the afternoon, the coastal bunker in the Zagros Mountains. The heavy blast doors were finally open. Hot desert sunlight spilled into the concrete room. The air smelled of cooling electronics and strong tea. Colonel Arash Khayan sat at his metal desk. He was writing his official after-action report. The narrative of the engagement was already heavily controlled. The High Command in Tehran praised the successful defense of the territorial boundary. They celebrated the tactical withdrawal of the American aircraft carrier. The fast attack boat crews were given commendations for their bravery under fire. Kian knew the absolute truth. He stared at the powered-down launch consoles. He knew exactly how close his hand had come to the final firing sequencer. He knew that the sudden American electronic blackout had saved him from making a world-ending mistake. If he had fired blindly into that jamming cone, he would have started a war his country could not win. He signed his digital document. His coastal defense battery remained completely intact, his young soldiers were alive, his coast was secure. In the modern era of automated kill chains and supersonic weapons, survival was the ultimate victory. 8 in the evening. The Pentagon in Washington. Strategic analysts reviewed the highly classified data packages from the Strait of Hormuz. The incident would not make the civilian news networks. There were no spectacular explosions to broadcast on television. There were no sunken warships to photograph from satellites. To the public world, it was just another quiet Tuesday in the Middle East. But the intelligence community understood the profound tactical shift. The Iranian coastal defense network was resilient and aggressive. The American electronic attack capability was incredibly overwhelming. Both nations had tested their absolute limits without crossing the fatal point of no return. Both sides now understood the true cost of pulling the trigger. 10 at night. The Arabian Sea. The Nimitz continued its southern patrol under a massive canopy of stars. The flight deck was relatively quiet. The ocean was black and endless. No missiles flew today. No ships were lost. But history shifted in the narrow and dangerous waters of the strait. When the invisible line was crossed, both military commanders chose restraint over ruin. They possessed the weapons to burn the world to the ground. They possessed the discipline to keep those weapons holstered. Modern warfare is decided not by who fires first. It is decided by who chooses not to fire at all.